Welcome to SimRacer 102, or the second installment of SimRacer training here on SRT. I'm your instructor Darren Ganji, and I'm going to pick up where Sean left off with SimRacer 101. One of the things most sim racers are missing is motion. And when I say most, you can't obtain it with a full motion simulator to a certain extent. But we're here to talk about the basics. When driving a car in the physical world, you can feel it getting loose or pushing into a corner. You can also feel the car dip under braking as well as push you back into the seat under acceleration. We're missing those G-forces the car is generating from that motion. Since we're missing that feeling or motion in sim racing, we need to trick our brains or train ourselves to simulate those senses. Everyone's heard of hand-eye coordination? Well, in sim racing, you really need sound in there too. Hand, eye, and ear coordination. This is especially true when you don't have a force feedback wheel. Force feedback wheel can get light when the car is getting loose, and without it, the only way to counteract what the car is doing is to have good or great sound, and to make sure you're getting as many frames per second out of your system. I'm no expert when it comes to these things, and I'm sure I'm going to miss some areas, and for that we'll start a thread in our forum titled SimRacer 102 System Tweaks. This next portion of the show is sponsored by eDimensional. Go to eDimensional by clicking on our affiliate banner, the one with the cute girl here at InsideSimRacing.tv. Feel the action with a built-in subwoofer. High quality audio performance at a very low price. Check out the Audio Effects Force Feedback Gaming Headset for just $49.95. Remember, click on our affiliate banner here at InsideSimRacing.tv for more information and more great products from eDimensional. First thing we're going to go over is the importance of good sound. You're going to need at least a decent set of headphones up to a full-blown surround sound system. Immersion is the key here. You want to be able to hear the engine rev, tires squeal, the road and air rushing by the car. Add a butt kicker to the mix, and that's another level of immersion. While I'm on the subject of audio, closing yourself in during a race, in other words shutting the doors, dimming the lights, you want to either blast your sound in your headphones or your speaker system, depending on what you can afford and what you can get away with. We also have Sean's focus tips up in our training section, and it's great to watch and see where you may need to focus more. To be a successful racer, whether it's online or in real life, you need to be able to focus or concentrate for long periods. Having a good sound system and making sure you block out all other sounds in the room and distractions is definitely one of the keys to being able to focus for long periods and also hit your marks consistently. You know, one of the things we talk about is immersion. Run a little Turissimo Cartera here. You know, I got my sound system cranked up, running a butt kicker LFE. And, you know, immersing yourself is definitely adds to the experience. And for me, it makes me faster. There's no question about it. I pick up a half a second to a second a lap by making sure I'm more immersed. I think the biggest key to sound is hearing the tire squeal or brake traction. In most sims, there's a way to turn up road noise, and we'll probably touch on that in the 200 series of training. If you can figure out how to do it in your favorite sim, definitely do it. Road and tire noise are very important. Also, I feel that engine noise is a very important key as well. I usually turn down the opponent's audio so that they are barely audible in order for me to hear where my RPMs are. Another thing about your sound settings before we get into video cards and settings is how many sounds you're hearing simultaneously. There's usually a slider within the game that allows you to adjust this. The more you're hearing, the more work your computer is doing. An area where you can improve your frames per second, or frame rate, is by turning down the amount of sounds you hear. Alright, that's your SR 102 sound tips. Next up on SimRacer 102, we're going to get into frames per second. Right after these messages here on SRT. Welcome back to SR 102. I'm Darren Ganji, your instructor, and thanks for tuning in. Next up, visual or video card setup. We're going to start with your monitor and its placement. Start by getting that monitor as close as possible. A 22-inch widescreen is a very nice racing monitor if you can afford it. If not, get the biggest you can afford. Triple screens or triple monitors is the ultimate, but that's for a future show and for the racers without a budget. We're going to talk about getting as many frames per second, or FPS, as we can out of your rig for a particular sim. Racing with things running like a slideshow is impossible. The human eye sees video motion smoothly at about 30 frames per second. As a sim racer, you really need to maintain at least 40 to 50 frames per second at all times to race properly. If you have a supercomputer, you can pretty much fast forward or just stop watching this because this may not apply to you. But if you're racing on a budget and need to tweak things to get the maximum FPS, here's some things that can help. I'm going to use R Factor for this demonstration because it's an ISI-based engine that most current sims are using. Let's start with the graphics configuration screen. There's three major choices here: DX7, 8, and 9. The lower the number, the faster your system will run, but at a loss of eye candy and smoothness. Racing on a computer, you have to dial in everything yourself. This is not like a console where you put the disc in and play. The faster your system is, the less of a chance that you will have a disadvantage out there, to an extent. If you have a recently built system and you've spent up to about $2,000 and it has a gaming graphics card like an ATI or NVIDIA, you should not be in a disadvantage against anyone. Next, I'm going to go over NVIDIA settings. Again, this is from my experience, and I've always had better luck with NVIDIA cards. For my race rig, I'm using an AGP 7300 graphics card with 500 megs of RAM. For this demonstration though, I'm going to use this gaming laptop, and I have an 8600 GTS. First thing you got to do is right-click on your desktop, and for me it says NVIDIA Control Panel. I have Vista, but if you have XP, click on Properties and you'll get to a similar screen to this. And then you're going to go to 3D Setting. Once you've made your way to the NVIDIA Control Panel, you can make a basic adjustment to select Quality versus Performance. Obviously the performance setting will net your best result. Then if you dive into the advanced settings, here there's a little link for me, you're going to find more sliders and checkboxes to further adjust your settings. Best way to find out what works for your system is trial and error. Make an adjustment and then turn that FPS counter on in-game. Control F for R Factor is what you use. See if that FPS counter rises. Keep going back and forth to maximize that frames per second. There's two disadvantages to running on a slower computer: FPS and world detail. Having more items populating the world around the tracks can give you more points for visual cues. Again, you need to maximize the senses you can use. Adding visual markers in the virtual world around you can help you with braking points, turn-in, acceleration, etc. Make sure when you're doing your FPS testing, you do it at identical points on the track. You probably should run it with AI cars on to give you more of an effect on your processor. Again, use trial and error. Go back and forth between the game and your NVIDIA settings to maximize your system. If I knew the magic settings, I'd definitely share them with you here on the show. For me, I just do what I mentioned, trial and error, to get it above that 40 FPS mark consistently. Now let's go in game. Visual settings in game all have an impact on FPS. Look at the amount of settings you can adjust. Max being full and the minimum being low. Medium and high are the middle settings, obviously. Top four sliders here are detail, circuit, player, opponent, texture. Then you go to texture filter where there's bi and trilinear, as well as anti-scotropic, I'm not even sure how to say that, at different levels. Again, it will depend on your video card, and the best thing for you to do is use trial and error to figure out what works best on your system. Then we have special effects, shadow blurs. Now here's a really important one: visible vehicles, or vehicles drawn. Every sim has this setting or one that's similar. This is a key setting for online racing. More cars equals less FPS. So the best way to dial this in is offline with AI cars. Mirrors being off or on can also make a big difference as well, as showing the steering wheel. In a future SR200 segment, we'll show you some in-depth video settings by editing your INI files. In R Factor, there's an auto FPS setting you can use as well to see how well it works with your system. Race 07 has a tool that will see what settings is best and adjust after each session too. So there's 11 adjustments in-game, plus the 3 or 4 settings in the sim setup or config. Then you have your NVIDIA settings. It can seem like a lot, and it is actually. It can take a really long time to get every last FPS out of your machine. I personally don't have the patience to mess with every single setting and just usually mess with a few. I suggest posting in the forums for NVIDIA, ATI, gaming, or anything regarding PC performance besides here in our forums. Remember, we're going to have that section up on our forum. If you have any good tips, make sure you post them out there for everybody to see, or just go there to check on some for yourself. All right, well that does it for SimRacer 102. A little more in depth as far as getting set up. In SimRacer 103, we're going to finish with the basics and getting set up for sim racing. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching. I'm Darren Ganji here on SRT.